Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time we're going to kind of keep the same topic we have over the last few days, the last few videos about retconning the sequels potentially and sort of the problems that Disney Star Wars is facing. Been getting just a ton of questions in the comments lately, so let's try to answer a few more of them. Let's keep the topic rolling, and we will begin with this question from Mikester, who asked, "Hey Thor, do you think if they ever decide to redo the sequels that they'd finally make proper use of George Lucas's original plans for them? Feel like that's something that would grab people's attention, especially with a lot of the recent prequel appreciation, that people would want to see the creator of Star Wars' vision fully realized in some form on the big screen." And first, there were a lot of questions like this one, asking if maybe bringing back George Lucas in some capacity is the answer, and as Mikester pointed out there, I think that is going to draw a lot of attention if you, in some capacity, can bring Lucas back. It might also offer a sort of legitimacy that has maybe been lacking lately, where people are going to feel like this is real Star Wars coming back, not Disney Star Wars. That George Lucas himself approves of it, and I'm not necessarily even saying you have to redo the sequel trilogy, that you have to do his, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. But I think him coming back in any capacity, beyond just him showing up on set for one of the shows or movies and taking a few pictures and talking about how good it all looks, I'm talking about him actually contributing story-wise. I'm not saying he'd have to write the whole thing, or direct, or produce, or anything like that. But if he had an idea for a show or a movie, and was involved a good deal, I think that is going to bring back some excitement to the franchise. Again, it makes waves, it is going to make headlines, and it's going to be on X and all of that sort of thing. It is going to get people talking about Star Wars if the creator returns. Now, I'm not saying I think that is going to happen. Lucas is not getting any younger. He has not shown any interest. We've heard nothing about him wanting to do something like that, and something tells me that they would be open to it. I think Disney would be open to Lucas coming back. If he went to them and said, "Hey, I have an idea for a show or a movie," at this point, I think they'd be willing to listen and give him a chance. And for all we know, Disney has even gone to him and said, "Hey, interested in doing anything?" And he's rejected it. In other words, I think if it was going to happen, it would have happened already. As for his sequel trilogy, would that be the way to go? And I've said before that I think it would have been a win-win scenario for them to have initially or originally done his sequels, and I know they might be a little wonky, we'll talk about that too, but I say it would have been a win-win for Disney because, well, on the one hand, if it is really good, if people love his sequels, he gets to finish out the story of the Skywalkers, right? It is his completed version of Star Wars, and Disney now has kind of a free license to move on from that and do their own thing with it. I think fans would have been more accepting of Disney if there had been almost like a passing of the torch where Lucas was involved in the first thing Disney had done, and heavily involved to the point where he was maybe not directing or producing again, or writing the whole thing, but it was his idea, his story, and he had some creative control, or a good deal of creative control over it. On the flip side, though, if it had been terrible, well, then people would have been probably okay with, again, Disney doing their own thing, right? If Lucas had kind of botched the ending of the Skywalker saga, as we now call it, or as Disney has kind of dubbed it, I think people would have been like, yeah, it's time for someone else to try their hand at Star Wars. Let's give Disney our support and see what they can do, and as long as they don't fumble whatever they do next, I think, again, they would have been in a pretty good position. You still would have let Lucas finish his Star Wars, and you still would be doing your own thing, and you would have had, again, kind of the support of the fans after Lucas's Star Wars hadn't ended quite so well. Now, do I think fans would have liked what Lucas had in store for the sequels? And keep in mind, we don't have a ton of details. We know his main villains, his main antagonists would have been Darth Talon and Darth Maul, which is a very interesting combination and continues his trend of really liking Twi'lek characters. Anyway, we also know it would have delved into the microbiotic realm. It would have dealt with the wills and more midichlorian stuff. And we would have learned more about, I think, the inner workings of it all, about the Force and how it all connects and symbiotic relationships and all that fun stuff. Lucas has made it pretty clear he would have gone headfirst into all that with his sequels. And even though I have no hate for the midichlorians, I think they're fine. They make sense. They are not the Force, as so many people confuse them for being. But anyway, I don't have a ton of problem with them. I know a lot of people do. And so there is a possibility that if he goes all in on that sort of thing, if we're just talking about wills and microbiotic forces and stuff like that, that a lot of people would have tuned out and not like that. especially in the more casual fan base or the average viewer who just wants to go see a Star Wars movie and have a good story underneath it. They want that substance, but they want that spectacle too, and they don't want crazy stuff in there, which is what they would probably see that as. Not that I'm, again, saying I think it's crazy. I get where Lucas was going with all that. I don't mind it so much, but a lot of people would have been turned off by that, I think. Alright, and now we move on to this question from Spineless Moderate, who asked, "Hey Thor, if Disney did retcon or reboot the sequels, do you think it would be better to keep the same key characters and just have a cohesive story for all three films to follow? Or should they fully remake it, characters and all? I almost feel like reworking the story, but keeping the key characters would alienate the least amount of existing fans, while still actually having the potential to entice the walkers to come check it out. But then there's that other part of me that thinks world between worlds, alternate timelines, MacGuffin, bam, new story while not erasing the current sequel trilogy. Then everyone is happy, but that feels too easy. I don't know, I'm stumped." And this was yet another question I saw a lot of people asking in one way or another. What do you do with the sequels if they're retconned? Or what do you do with everything else you've done since Disney took over? Do you retcon it all? Or just the sequels? And do you try to work them in somehow? Or is it like they never happened? And as you suggest, I think to make the most people happy, or to keep some people happy who really like the sequels, and yes, those people do exist, I think you try to work them in. I think you try to have the best of both worlds, where they're no longer a part of the main storyline somehow, yet they did happen. And that is the compromise you would have to, I guess, accept if you're one of those people who have given the ultimatum where I'm not coming back until they're gone. Well, they're kind of gone, but they're kind of still there. You could use the world between worlds to change the timeline somehow, and you make it where it is something that is kind of a one and done thing. You don't want it implied that you can just always be changing the timeline. It just so happens that there was a significant event that needed changing, and that has been changed, and now you really can't do that anymore. And then at the same time, you can keep characters like Rey and Finn and Poe and Kylo and all of that if you really want to. You could have them still exist and be kind of the same, kind of different. You could kind of redo the sequel story eventually, or the sequels we have now. Because the fun thing is, if you do recast, which is the way I think we should go, I definitely don't think we should do AI or anything like that. But if you do recast and you get back some relatively younger actors, right? Actors in their 30s and 40s perhaps, we don't then have to go 30 years into the future with the sequels. We can have them maybe 5 or 10 years after, maybe incorporate them somehow into the Mandoverse stuff, because again, I think you keep that. A lot of people kind of like that stuff. It's been solid. So you keep that and you incorporate the new sequels into that and just say, well, whatever they have done here has kind of undone the sequels later. Again, we use the world between worlds, which we've already seen it in the Ahsoka series, so anything's possible. And yes, we've seen it in Rebels and Clone Wars as well to a degree with Mortis, but what I'm saying is we've now seen it in the more mainstream stuff. We've seen it in a live-action show, which means they're not afraid to do it for the mainstream audience. So you use the world between worlds to imply something needed to be changed. It can't be changed again. You then have the sequel trilogy take place after all the Mandoverse stuff, the new sequel trilogy. The new conclusion of the Lucas Star Wars saga. And if he's willing to, yes, you do bring back Lucas to give some input, which again gives it some more legitimacy, you could say. You could also bring in a Timothy Zahn to help with that as well, and kind of incorporate elements of Heir to the Empire and other elements of the EU. And then in the future, we could have it where characters like Rey, Poe, and Finn also have a new story in case you are fans of them and don't want to see them fully erased. That would sort of be my best case scenario to try to make as many people as possible happy. And I know some are going to say, don't embrace this part or don't embrace that part. I want only my part embraced. But I think, again, you have to have some compromise here. If they ever did do something like this, and I'm not saying they ever will, as we've been discussing in the previous few videos, I think the possibility is certainly on the table. If Disney gets to the point where they feel like nothing else is working with Star Wars, they're going to get desperate and try just about anything, which includes potentially retconning the sequels, bringing back those OT characters in some capacity for another story. And so this might just be the best way to, again, make as many people as possible happy, and then you just try to do things right going forward. All right, and moving on to another question that several people asked, and we'll pick this one from John, and he said, "Hey Thor, talking about recasting the OT cast for the sequels, who would you pick?" And I'm not going to get into the full cast, but I certainly would think you would pick Alden Ehrenreich to play Han, who of course played him in the Solo movie. I think you keep Donald Glover as well to play Lando. I think Billie Lourd, the daughter of Carrie Fisher, is the perfect fit to play Leia, even though, yes, she is elsewhere in the canon, but that's in the sequels, which would be undone anyway. And then you bring in perhaps Sebastian Stan to play Luke Skywalker. That seems to be a popular fan casting. Everybody seems to think he looks like a young Mark Hamill, so I think that would work. And yeah, those would be my main characters. Alright, well that is going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn. Take to the comments below and tell me what you think about any and all of this, or by all means, ask a question for a future lightning response video. You just start your comment off with "Hey Thor," ask your question, and I try to get to it in a future video. Again, I get a ton of questions, so apologies if I don't answer yours. It's nothing personal. A lot of times I kind of randomly pick and just go with the flow. Either way, leave those questions or comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars, and until next time, thanks for watching.